The house on Ashgrove Lane. The house on Ashgrove Lane had been abandoned for decades, its rotting facade a constant reminder to the townsfolk of the sinister events that transpired within its walls. No one went near it, not even kids looking for a cheap thrill. The last known residents, the Atwoods, had vanished without a trace on a stormy night in 1974, leaving behind an untouched dinner table and a single locked room. For journalist Clara Hayes, this house was a goldmine of potential. She was writing an investigative piece about unexplained disappearances and saw the Atwood case as her magnum opus. Determined to uncover the truth, she packed her equipment and headed to Ashgrove Lane. Her editor had warned her against going alone, but Clara was stubborn. She wanted the exclusive. The front door was ajar, creaking open at the slightest touch. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of mildew and decay. The wooden floor groaned beneath her boots as she stepped in, flashlight sweeping across peeling wallpaper and shattered picture frames. A diary sat open on a side table, its pages brittle and yellowed with age. It belonged to Grace Atwood, the family's eldest daughter. The last entry read, "The whispering won't stop. They're in the walls now, watching, waiting. If we don't leave soon, I don't think we'll survive the week." Clara felt a chill run down her spine. She took photos of the diary and pressed on. Her first discovery came in the dining room. The table was still set, plates of food covered in a thick layer of mold. But something was wrong. One plate was overturned, and a knife lay embedded in the wood, as if someone had driven it into the table in a fit of rage. She moved to the second floor, drawn to the locked door mentioned in every account of the Atwood case. The doorframe was covered in deep gouges, as though someone or something had desperately tried to claw their way in or out. Clara tried the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. She used a crowbar from her bag and pried it open. The room was empty except for a single antique mirror standing in the center. Its ornate frame was adorned with carvings of twisting vines and grotesque faces. Clara approached cautiously, her flashlight beam reflecting off the glass. But instead of her own reflection, she saw a young girl staring back at her, wide-eyed and terrified. It was Grace Atwood. Before Clara could react, the girl whispered, "Don't trust them." The reflection shimmered, and Clara felt a cold hand grasp her shoulder. She spun around, but no one was there. The door slammed shut behind her, trapping her inside. The mirror began to ripple like water, and shadows emerged from its surface, twisted skeletal figures with hollow eyes. Clara backed against the wall, fumbling for her phone to call for help, but there was no signal. The shadows whispered in unison, their voices like the rustling of dead leaves. "We've been waiting for you." Suddenly, Clara felt her body being dragged toward the mirror by an unseen force. She screamed, clawing at the floor, but it was futile. Just as she was pulled through the glass, everything went black. Clara woke up in the same room, but it was different. The walls were pristine, the air warm and fragrant. It was as though she had traveled back in time. She heard voices downstairs, laughter, and the clinking of dishes. She crept to the landing and peered down to see the Atwood family gathered at the dinner table, alive and well. But something was off. Their movements were jerky, almost mechanical. Grace sat apart from the rest, her eyes darting nervously toward the mirror now hanging in the living room. Clara tried to call out, but no sound escaped her lips. She realized, with dawning horror, that she wasn't just watching, she was inside the mirror. Time passed differently in the mirror's world. Clara could see visitors come and go over the decades, always drawn to the house. Each one met a similar fate, lured by the mirror, consumed by the shadows. But none stayed long. They became part of the house, their faces appearing briefly in reflections before fading into oblivion. One day, Clara saw a familiar figure enter the house. It was her editor, Michael, holding a flashlight and calling out her name. He had come looking for her after she failed to return. She banged on the glass, screaming, but he couldn't hear her. Michael found the diary, the moldy dinner table, and finally the mirror. He stared into it, and Clara saw her chance. "Michael!" she screamed, her voice finally breaking through. He froze, staring at her reflection in shock. "Clara, is that you?" "Yes, get me out of here. Break the mirror." But before he could react, the shadows emerged again, wrapping around his body. Clara watched helplessly as they dragged him into the mirror world. Only this time, the shadows didn't stop with him. They reached for her too. When Clara woke up, she was back in the house, lying on the floor of the locked room. The mirror was gone, replaced by a plain wall. Michael was nowhere to be found. As she stumbled downstairs, the house appeared different, modern, lived in. A family was sitting in the living room, staring at her in shock. "Who are you?" the father demanded. Clara looked down at herself. Her hands were wrinkled and aged, her reflection in a nearby window revealing a face decades older than she remembered. I'm Clara Hayes, she stammered. The father paled. Clara Hayes disappeared in 1974. My grandfather wrote about her. You shouldn't be here. The whispers started again, louder this time. The shadows crept from the corners of the room, and Clara realized the terrible truth. The house never let anyone go. She hadn't escaped. She had only been reset. And now, the cycle was about to begin again.